know that there's a lot of different ways. And then there's, tools like the continuous glucose monitor that if you're just confused or fed up, or you're like, I'm just tired of guessing. I'm tired of people telling me I just need to eat better, right? And whether that's in the context of because you're looking to lose weight, or maybe you are pre-diabetic, maybe you are perimenopausal, maybe you have PCOS, and be like, all right, give me something else. Like, give me something else I can work with to try to understand my body, that these tools are out there, and whether or not, if people can, budget for them for a short period of time, I usually say, try to do so just because you can get some really good insights, even for a short period of time.
Yeah. Hey, friend, welcome back to PCOS Unfiltered. I'm Lindsie, former ER nurse turned health coach and author of Healing Beyond the Diagnosis. Today's episode is a must listen if you've ever felt like your body changed out of nowhere, especially if you've said things like, why is the weight suddenly going to my belly? Why am I doing the same things, but nothing is working anymore? Or my labs look fine, but I feel anything but fine. Because we're diving into the metabolic side of hormone shifts, the part that often gets overlooked when we talk about PCOS, perimenopause, and menopause. I'm sitting down with Beverly Mazza, a registered nurse, board-certified nurse coach, and founder of Purely Present Health, an integrative and functional health practice supporting women in midlife who are navigating insulin resistance, prediabetes, weight loss resistance, and the hormonal roller coaster of perimenopause and menopause. In this episode, we're talking about the metabolic changes Beverly sees first in women as hormones shift, why blood sugar and insulin matter, even when your A1C still looks normal, how continuous glucose monitors, CGMs, can be used as a personalized awareness tool, not just for diabetes, and one of my favorite overlaps, how stress, sleep, and nervous system regulation can directly impact metabolic health. And a quick teaser before we start. If you've been wanting a real-life way to stop spinning in your head and start building body trust skills you can use daily, you're going to love what I'm hosting next. Stay tuned at the end for more details. Now, as a reminder, the content shared on PCOS Unfiltered is for informational and educational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are not intended to serve as medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, exercise, or treatment plan. The information shared is based on personal experience and expert interviews and is not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Okay, let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Beverly Mazza.
So now it's like, it's out there, right? Which is awesome. We'll talk a little bit about maybe, some of the issues with this. But so, how I'm working with my patients and clients, I always say it's not in the same way your endocrinologist or like a diabetes educator might be working with someone who's managing insulin and things like that. I always say like that's their specialty. That's what we're working with. So when I'm supporting, my patients and my clients, they're definitely not on insulin, right? They might be on a GLP-1 agonist and they might be on metformin, things like that. But so much of it is around like empowering the patient or the client by like, let's see, what were you eating? What were you doing? And then like, what do we see, right? What patterns? And it's always everyone, it's like a fingerprint. So everybody kind of has their own way that their body is responding. There's definitely some patterns that, that I can look at and be like, okay, we're seeing this is kind of familiar, but then it's all just a little bit different for everyone, right? So how you respond to something is different than how I respond. How you respond to something one day might be a little bit different than how you might respond the next day too. So there's also a madness in this for some people, but I've done this for so much and looked at so like hundreds of these that I feel like most of the time we can help kind of make sense of stuff even that doesn't always make sense. Now, we're always contending with these are medical devices and they're imperfect, right? So you might have like a bad sensor, you might have an inaccurate sensor, like things like that. But that's when we kind of lean on a lot of, well, what's the overall metabolic health picture? So kind of ties us back to that first question is I might see something in the CGM data is one data set, but then what were those other labs right? What were those most recent labs that you had? What are you reporting? Like, what does your diet look like? What do your behaviors look like? What does your body composition look like? So we don't take anything at sort of face value with any of this stuff. And that's what I say too, because, the hemoglobin A1C was the best that we had for a while. But, there can be variations with that inaccuracy. I mean, some medications can affect that. We have to look at, if someone's complete blood count too, because sort of like the life cycle of their red blood cell, because we're measuring the sugar on the red blood cell. So if you have if you stuff dying, if your red blood cells are dying off quicker, versus longer, you're gonna have more sugar if they're hanging around in the system longer. So there's an imperfectness to this. If you have anemia, so we're always like looking at all that stuff too. But it's why sort of I think too, for anyone with like PCOS too, if they have maybe this A1C and it's like normal and it's like I'm not pre-diabetic, which I've heard from a lot of women, so they don't think that they really have this like insulin resistant state, maybe that they can intervene, right? Or make like empowered choices by going like a layer deeper. So I'm always like, let's just look at all of this together, but it can be super informative to give us sometimes reveal something that we haven't seen anywhere else. And so like your average might look great, right? But like you might be going super high and super low and high, and like that's not making you feel so great. So there's opportunity to optimize in there. And so like, you could line five people up with the same hemoglobin A1C on a lab, and their CGMs will tell a totally different story. And maybe only one of those people will actually be quite optimal, right? When we look at it. So it's an opportunity. And I think for a lot of people, it's kind of like a fun new way to like get moment to moment insights. And I've had so many patients and clients reflect that it's such a good behavior change tool because they're like, yep, okay, like I see what happened at 8 o'clock when I like ate that cookie, and not in like a punitive place, but in a like awareness of like, okay, like maybe I won't do that every night, right? Let me make some different decisions around that, and then they can play around with that and they can see the differences over time.
Yeah. Well, and can sensitivities play a role in blood sugar too? Like you mentioned, somebody might have the same thing a couple days in a row, but one day it may not affect their blood sugar, another day it might. It might be combined with maybe they had something that could be like that they're sensitive to that could be affecting that another time.
Yeah, so usually with the kind of the foods when people are like, "Oh, I ate this at one point," a lot of times it's like, "What did you eat it with?" Like not necessarily like a food sensitivity, but like what did you pair it with, right? We know sort of like not eating our carbs like naked so they break down super quickly can be really helpful. But what time of day did you eat this? What state were you in? Were you eating on the run on the fly? Versus were you seated and you were relaxed? Had you like, had the morning coffee and then, like had the banana and then ran out the door or were like chasing the kids or the dog or something like that. Or maybe you had and you had a big blood sugar rise, but then maybe you had a nice balanced lunch and then you had a banana. So there's so many different things that go into context of that. So we're always kind of breaking that apart with people. There's some very obvious things where someone will repeatedly and just be like, okay, my body's responding in this way. This is obviously, suboptimal. I want to maybe make some changes on this. Not necessarily like I can never eat this food, right? If there's foods that people really love, and we see this a lot of times with like fruit, right? Because fruits, breaks down into fructose and fruit's amazing. We don't want to like, we don't want to like lose out on all the great other properties we're getting. But oftentimes, sometimes with that, we just realize if you are like having trouble managing that, like you might just be that person that like can't, be starving and fasted and break your fast with like 2 cups of blueberries, right? We might need to dress those blueberries up, right? We might have to really figure out and optimize like sort of like, what's that threshold of like your bucket, right? And that gets like into the weeds with people. I don't start people with this, but they might realize that they were like over consuming. Maybe they thought that, there was a free for all on all things fruit. And then they realize, oh no, like I actually can really optimize my hormones by having the fruit, enjoying that, but also eating from these other sort of like buckets, right? A healthy fat and fiber and things like that. So I always say not to like, you see the commercials of like the woman has the CGM and like she bites a banana and then she's like, oh no, my blood sugar went up. And those always like drive me crazy because it's just out of context. And I'm just like, I feel like then everyone's gonna like think that's like them, or that means that like they can't eat the banana and such. And we really try to personalize it, if it's an unhealthy food, I put that in quotes, obviously, because, that can be variable depending on who you ask. A lot of times people just they kind of like make that decision where like if this is a food that they feel like doesn't always make them feel good, right? I don't know, maybe it's like the bag of Doritos or something. That they're like, okay, like I see what this is doing, and this is going to help me make a different choice. So.
Yeah. How long do your clients typically wear it for? Like a week, a month? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it depends on the device. So right now the devices are whether they're prescription or over the counter, they're running anywhere from 10 to 15 days, kind of depending on the manufacturer. And, they're inserted on the back of either the upper arm, mostly. Some of them are approved for the belly. And there's no like needle left inside. There is like the small little filament that goes through the skin and is measuring the sugar there, but it sends the readings to your smartphone. And so that just sends to the app continuously. There's no more scanning. People used to have to like bring the phone up to the device and scan. So there's no more of that. And so it's just collecting those readings. And like hopefully sometimes they die a little bit early, right? They're a device, they don't, but that's typically and it looks like the way the market's trending, like Dexcoms have been manufactured. They just released their 15-day, which was kind of because Abbott, the other big manufacturer, did their 15-day. So I say depending on what people get, because sometimes, I work with people if they have a supportive PCP and maybe they do have a diagnosis of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, even if they're not on insulin, insurance will partially cover it sometimes. Not always, but sometimes they will. There's definitely some insurances are like you have to be a type 2 diabetic, you have to be on injectable insulin. And then oftentimes, because they are available over the counter, people might just go ahead and purchase that. You can do like about $99 on average for two sensors, which could give you about 30 days of data. So I have a lot of clients that will opt for that as even like a one-time investment. I always say, like, some people will continue and do this constantly. Some people will do this every quarter. They'll do it every 6 months. They'll do it every year. Whatever like fits like your mental state if you want to be doing it all the time and also your budget. I think there's a lot of flexibility of what people can then choose to do.
Yeah. So when, like, in like a week's time, or like you said, the 15 days, do you get enough data, do you feel like, during that time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I always like to sometimes I like to get at least seven. That's like if it falls off before 7 days, I'm just like, let's do it again. But likely, yeah, the 14, 15 days is really good. And usually when I, work with people, it's like we're gonna like kind of keep things status quo. Like let's just really see. Like if we have even like lab work that's showing we know you're pre-diabetic or things like that, like let's just see what's going on without trying to like make things look good or make changes that we think are going to be helpful. Everyone says they're like, but I want like a good grade. I'm like, we can like work, you can work on the good grade after, at least for a week. Sometimes people, I'm just like, they're like something so obvious that they're just like, I want to change this after, it's very repeatable and it's been about 7 days. It's like, all right, you can start playing around with some of the principles and some of the, pieces that we've talked about. But yeah, typically after that, and then I find that for most people, um, you know, I can look at the data, provide guidance, usually provide really like personalized feedback in areas where they can optimize. And depending on, again, on their capacity, are we going after every meal, every snack? Are we going after every habit? Are we picking one thing? But a lot of times people then want to put another one on because then they're like, okay, let's see if what we talked about is working. Like, let's see if this works for me. And I always like to say it's a blood sugar journey, right? Like you'll go on it this year if you try it. Like I went on it a couple years ago and kind of never looked back because I find it so insightful. But like the more you wear them, and I have a lot of people express this, they get more comfortable with it and they start to understand like, okay, like these are the general sort of like guidelines. This is why I think things are happening in their way. And it can take time. And that will, we can chat a little bit about this, about now that they're available, though, how they can create some confusion and worry when you don't know what you're looking at. So that's like a big problem now, of course, with people kind of are putting them on and not necessarily having like personalized guidance on like what these numbers mean and what's optimal for them.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great point, because like I said, I looked into them, and I think like some, like if you just pay out of pocket, no prescription, no anything, it looks like there's memberships and it looks like there's different
Mm,
levels. You might be able to get some guidance from somebody, with
hmm.
got it from, but then others, yes, like depending on if you go at the lower level of the membership or whatever it is, then
Yes.
it's kind of on your own.
Yeah, so that speaks to like how I'm often with people, obviously in in primary care as such, or a lot of times we'll try to leverage their insurance if we use the insurance for that. Obviously, those are just standalone medical devices, and then they're working with, myself through like the coaching and the personalization. With my private clients, it's the same thing. We kind of just do the device. So no memberships. It's just basically like you get it. You have an app. The app is free, so I work a lot with the Dexcom Stelo because the information can be shared to me as the practitioner, just as if it was a medical device. And so you really get to see a nice report with that. So that app is just free. You can log stuff, you can take pictures of your food, you could share your data with your doctor. You don't have anybody interpreting your data for you. And then I feel like there's another subset where people will go with like memberships, like maybe like levels, or I think Signos as such, where you maybe can get the device and then you can like pay for like a membership, probably to work with, I presume, like a nutrition coach. I can't speak to like what that looks like because obviously like people are working with me, so I don't know what that looks like. But I think it's like important for people to choose working with somebody who is not going to just give generic advice and who has a good understanding of actually like looking at these, because it is like one of the most like personalized, in-depth, I feel like, assessments that we can do, like clinically when we're kind of looking at this and educating and making recommendations. And also I speak to this like from a nurse, like if I just had CGM data, it was just looking at your blood sugar curve, I wouldn't be able to really get much meaning from that if I didn't know your clinical lab markers. Where are you at with your labs? Like, what are these other pieces look like? What is your medical history? What is your medications? Because it's not just food. As I say, it is like not just about food. So, and like that's where sometimes it's just if somebody's just coaching you on like cut out all your carbs or like don't eat past this time of day and like it gets very just generic in that sense, then I feel like people aren't really like getting the most personalized experience out of it. It might get overly restrictive and confused.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question was using that data, to
Yeah.
guide your client, beyond food choices with, you mentioned the nervous system regulation piece and exercise and all of that. Like, how do you use that data for those pieces as well?
Yeah, I love that so much because I say this all the time. Like sometimes in using the continuous glucose monitor is like sometimes like people's like first window into having a conversation about what stress is doing to their body. And it's so interesting because it's like everyone knows, okay, I shouldn't be stressed, or I know I'm in a high stress job or I'm super stressed out, but it's somewhat like I don't really need to focus on that because I need to just eat better and exercise, right? So they're just like, I know that's there. And it's interesting, as I said, sometimes we look at this and maybe we see actually like just their blood sugar is always running high, right? And so this can tell us a little bit about the body being in a sympathetic foot on the gas, need to get to safety, liver's pushing out its glucose, pushing out its glucose. And it's like, hey, like, maybe like you're not having these big spikes in response to your food, or maybe like in general, like you're pretty balanced, but like you're just high, right? Like we need to look at this. Like, how can we support your nervous system? Or actually see in like an acute full stressful event, I think people log this is like in a moment of stress, right? So maybe this is a difficult conversation, like something happened at work, I don't know, the kid's throwing up, like all these different things people will write on their journals to me. It's like blood sugar spikes up, right? And that's just, it's a physiological response. Your body, it makes sense, right? When it's threatened, it wants to get you to safety. And how did it do that? It push that sugar into your muscles so you could run from that tiger, right? So very adapted. It doesn't know that maybe that was just a thought of you worrying about the conversation you just had with your mother or something like that. So that realization, I feel like just really broadens people's perspective to be like, okay, now I see. Okay, now I see. And sometimes we're starting is like midday. We're doing a meditation, we're doing breath work, we're doing some like support of your vagus nerve. If that's, especially like I feel like for my real like high achievers, like type A driven professionals that are like at their desk all day long, they're like, all right, I'm like, 5 minutes. I'm like, let's do it, 5 minutes. And, they start doing it. And sometimes it's so impactful. Other times it's like that before bed and it's the wind down routine at bed. And then, of course, like the support around the nutrition. And then if they're not moving their bodies, obviously we know that being sedentary is not good, but sometimes we can't commit to going to the gym 5 days a week, right? So we can't, we don't have access maybe to weights. So we're talking about body weights. Sometimes we're just talking about if you are a person that's chained to your desk, I'm like, can you just get up? Right? It's like get up and move a little bit. Go for a little walk around the office as things. So there's all these little like micro interventions that when they're wearing the CGM too, is like they can play around with it. So sometimes it's like, okay, I used to walk before my lunch, but now I'm walking after my lunch. And like, what's that impact on my blood sugar, right? I just did a meditation for 5 minutes and my blood sugar was a little bit high because I was stressed out. And then, oh, cool, look, I can see it going down on the CGM. And so it's just like this like personalized feedback loop that I think these things are super cool. We're talking about like enjoying like geeking out on this kind of stuff. I love seeing that. But I think it then comes from a place of empowerment of not just like, oh, I have high blood sugar. Oh, I have prediabetes. Or like my doctor said, I need to watch this and we'll recheck it next year. This is like the big thing. It's like, no, like we can take action now, right? And sometimes with really small things that aren't just about food, even though food is a big one. I'm not gonna count that one out. But sometimes I think there's like an over emphasis on that too.
Yeah, I love that. So, what are some common mistakes that you see when people start using these devices?
Yeah, common mistakes I would say is kind of just, getting them and, putting them on and just going about their way without really understanding what they're looking at. So some things I have seen happen with that is they're Googling a lot. So they're Googling like what's a normal blood sugar, where should my blood sugar be? And so two things with that. One, the internet's going to give you like this whatever range. It's not going to understand like what is your health history, what are your other metabolic markers, how high risk are you for certain things. So oftentimes, sometimes people think they're doing pretty darn good because they're going by a metric of like a type 2 diabetic, right? Like they're like, so it's like, no, that's not really good. Like we would actually have a different window for you, right? Maybe, right? Depending on your history as such. So that's a big one too, where then sometimes people I feel like are too cavalier and they think that things look good or that like everything's normal because they've read that blood sugar goes up and down during the day. But it's like, do you know what's actually optimal versus suboptimal, right? You're not going to know that unless somebody's coaching you through that. And then other times too, people get overly stressed because they're fixated on every little thing and they don't understand what they're looking at. They're seeing their blood sugar going up and down. I've had some people just trash them because they're like, this couldn't possibly be accurate. Because how could my blood sugar possibly go this high? And I'm like, well, it could be an error. We don't know. We'd have to look deeper. But it also, just because you're not diabetic doesn't mean you can't have a really high blood sugar at some point in response to something. So, and then with that too, I've had people get a really high blood sugar and then panic because they're seeing a really high blood sugar and they're Googling and it's like, you're diabetic, right? Not understanding that like we got to look at this all in a context. So that can drive, I think, a lot of fear and confusion too. I've seen people with placement issues, right? Especially for whatever reason. I don't know if it's AI. You see photos of CGMs and people are wearing them like in their deltoid muscle and in their bicep and like now that I mention that, you'll probably see it. So I think this is
Mhm.
just weird, like AI placements of things that I've seen lately, and I'm just like, because positioning can matter, right? Like where this is being inserted to, it's only approved certain places to get accurate readings. So I've had people actually apply them in the wrong places, which is a big thing too. Hydration status too can make a big difference. Like if we're not optimally hydrated, this is reading the sugar levels in the fluid space, so that's going to have a big impact on it. And then I think like not necessarily, understanding all the different factors, right? So like they might have like a really strenuous workout and see their blood sugar go really high, which is actually not unusual and is actually common and it's not the same as eating a donut. And so I would never want somebody to see their blood sugar go super high from like a workout and then say, "Oh, this is why like I shouldn't work out this much because my blood sugar went high." When there's such context into actually no, there's a whole different pathway of like how it's not using insulin and things like that. So there's just so much to unpack. So I think that it's just important for people to, understand and work with someone so they can, okay, what does this mean for me? That's like the big thing.
Yeah, everybody's so different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if if our listeners could take away one thing today, based off of everything we talked about, metabolic health, hormones, these, tools like CGMs, what would you want them to understand?
Yeah. So I mean, like reflecting back on our questions, I think I'm a big like data person. So I feel like advocating for yourself to get those labs drawn. I've come across all wacky sorts of things with annual lab work being like just a CBC. Like, I mean, it just, which is a complete blood count, right? Which tells us like nothing about in general your metabolic health. So I think it's important to like really kind of advocate, do your own research. I always support, my clients, patients being like, hey, these are kind of the labs we want to be looking at. Like I've even seen people not get cholesterol panels once a year, and that's crazy to me. So there's just certain things like, that standard of care, they're not all expensive tests, right? And so that's something to think about too. A lot of times these tests are covered by insurance, and they don't necessarily need to be super expensive. So I think definitely like actually like figuring out where you are sort of in your metabolic health picture. And do you have all the information that you need to be able to kind of go to that next stage to be like, where am I going to hone in and as such too? And there are direct to consumer labs now, right? There's a lot of different ways that people can purchase labs out of pocket. Some obviously at higher costs when you go into the big memberships that sell you like a big bundle of like very advanced biomarkers. But I always tell people like, there's some basic labs that really can give us a good start, especially when it comes to metabolic health, too. Obviously, there's other ones we might layer on. But know what they are. And if you do have them, go back and look at them. See how you've been trending, right? I'm a big one for spreadsheets. Like, where is this at? Is this telling me something? What is information? So I track that every year, too, and then get curious about that as well. I think also just recognizing that this is like a whole body approach when it comes to insulin resistance, PCOS, prediabetes, hormonal shifts in perimenopause, menopause, right? As if anything we've talked about is all of these things are interconnected. And for each of us, like there's going to be different levers that we're going to pull. Like for some, it might just be like, I'm really dialing in my nutrition. I really need to dial in my sleep. I can do these two things now, but I can't get to the gym and start strength training because I'm so tired and like I can't like think straight, right? So just realizing that like we can't necessarily do it all at once, and that it's okay to find like what's going to be like your focus and to approach that gently and just realize and understand there's not like one thing that's more important than the other and that all of these are like really interconnected. And so I hope that gives people permission then sometimes to not go to the gym and go sit and meditate. Like I say that all the time. I'm like, take what is your nervous system telling you right now? And like sometimes that might be the more supportive choice for you, like in that moment. And just know that there's a lot of different ways. And then there's, tools like the continuous glucose monitor that if you're just confused or fed up, or you're like, I'm just tired of guessing. I'm tired of people telling me I just need to eat better, right? And whether that's in the context of because you're looking to lose weight, or maybe you are pre-diabetic, maybe you are perimenopausal, maybe you have PCOS, and be like, all right, give me something else. Like, give me something else I can work with to try to understand my body, that these tools are out there and whether or not, if people can, budget for them for a short period of time. I usually say, try to do so just because you can get some really good insights, even for a short period of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, you said a lot of good stuff there. It kind of sums up sums up the podcast in general, and that's why I've loved having you on. But yeah, you need all these things. There's so many things working together in the body that a lot of people don't think about. And then being able to advocate for yourself and use that knowledge and ask the right questions, with your provider, um, to be able to go on this journey and to better health and healing. So love it.
Yeah.
Last question. How can people find you and connect with you?
Oh, yeah. So you can always land on my website, which is just, purelypresenthealth.com. You can find me on Instagram at purelypresenthealth, and happy to kind of connect with you to hop on my mailing list. I have a great resource for women and perimenopause with prediabetes. sort of these like hidden things we should look at to support you. And I actually think it's a really great resource if anyone has PCOS or if they're just in perimenopause and maybe they're just starting to see these shifts, but don't necessarily even have a diagnosis of perimenopause. Some of the things that I spoke about that I have found have been like really good strategic tools for my clients that are kind of specific that you can kind of jump into and start utilizing.
Awesome. Of course, I'll link all that in the show notes as well. But
Yeah.
really, really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share your knowledge and everything. I love it. Love this conversation. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
I love this conversation with Beverly because it brings so much clarity to something so many women are experiencing. Hormonal shifts don't just change your mood or cycle, they change your metabolism too. If there's one theme I hope you're walking away with, it's this. You are not broken, you're not lazy, and you're not failing because generic advice isn't working. Your body is giving you data through symptoms, through patterns, through trends in labs. And as Beverly said so well, the goal is to figure out which lever to pull first based on your capacity and your season of life. If you want to connect with Beverly, you can find her at purelypresenthealth.com and on Instagram at purelypresenthealth. She also has a resource for women in perimenopause navigating prediabetes and metabolic shifts. And honestly, if you have PCOS or suspect insulin resistance, you'll probably find it helpful too. I'll link everything in the show notes for you. And as promised, let's talk about what's coming up next. Mindful to Mindful, our live workshop on March 15th at noon Eastern. This workshop is for you if you've tried everything and feel like you're stuck between two extremes, either trying to be perfect with food or feeling like you can't follow through at all. Inside this live experience, we're going to teach you how to recognize what kind of hunger is actually driving the urge to eat so you stop guessing, calm the nervous system before food decisions, because dysregulation changes everything, create a simple, repeatable rhythm that supports your hormones, blood sugar, and cravings, and shift from mindless autopilot to confident, self-led choices without tracking, obsessing, or starting over every Monday. If you've been telling yourself, I know what to do, I just can't stay consistent, this is for you. Because we're not doing more discipline, we're building the skills that make consistency feel possible. Check the show notes to register for Mindful to Mindful on March 15th. And if you love this episode, it would mean the world if you leave a review, share it with a friend, or screenshot it and tag me so I can thank you and reshare. Now, all right, I am sending you so much love, and I will see you on the next episode of PCOS Unfiltered. Nourish, Heal, Thrive.